In 2004, intent-based UDFs were introduced in ProEngineer Wildfire 4.0. And the idea is that this would automate the placement of user-defined features in target models. And I say automate with air quotes because there's nothing really automatic about it. In the 20 years since, I've always wondered, how do you set up the source model for defining this user-defined feature? In part one, I showed the way that the functionality was supposed to be used, and I described my descent into madness and obsession. I've spent way too many hours trying to figure out this functionality, and even though no one uses this functionality, I finally have. I'm going to share it with you. So in part one, I showed how we were able to place two different user-defined features for keyways in a target model. And the target model has a bunch of datum references set up in order to facilitate the placement. Let me jump over to another model. Here is the end result of the journey. So it's essentially all the features from here to here in order to set up the UDF. Not all of these are in the UDF, but all of these are necessary to set up the UDF. I'm going to show you that process. Let me go to a different model in order to define this from scratch. Okay, here's the part model in which I am going to set up my user-defined feature and store it. Right now, it is a sketch that is a square and it's an extrude. It's some geometry in order to start off my part. The first thing that you're going to do is create any datums that are going to be used in the user-defined feature later on. And I say used in with air quotes because these are going to be the basis for some intent references that you will define later on. So my user-defined feature is going to be a keyway. It is an extrude. It's basically a cut. So I'm going to need a sketch and a datum point. The sketch is going to have a sketch plane and an orientation reference plane. I could use the existing datums like the datum plane called top and the datum plane called right, but I'm going to start out by creating a datum plane for those explicit purposes. Let me start out by creating a plane, and I'll create a plane on the plane called top. And let me go to the properties tab, and I'm going to call this one the sketch plane. Hit the enter key, and then I will click on the OK button. So there I have my first reference. I don't need to see top anymore, so I'm going to hide it to reduce my screen clutter. Now I need to create an orientation reference plane. Let's create a plane, and this one will be co-located on the plane called right. Come on, pick right. Let me try query select. There we go. Now I have that selected. Let me go to the properties tab. I'm going to call this my orient plane, and then click the OK button. Let me hide the datum plane called right. And now I'm going to create a datum point. Let's create a point, and it'll be located on the plane called sketch plane. And let me locate it at, let me go to the offset references. I'll locate a distance from the plane called orient plane. Let me grab the other one that I didn't use. Was it called top? Oh, no, let me try using the plane called, I can't remember which one, front. Okay, yeah, these two planes. Let me change these dimensions to 0 and 0. And so now I've got a point I can use. Let's click the OK button. Okay, so now I've got the datum features that will be used to define some intent references or datum reference features. These datum reference features are not to be confused with datum reference features in GD&T. So let me create a new datum. Let me go to the datum overflow menu and then reference, and then we will change the type here to intent datum plane. And this is one of the most important steps here. We're going to check the box to define an intent name. we're going to give a name to this one. I'm going to call this my UDF sketch plane. And this is very important. This is going to come into play later on when we set up our target model. We're going to have to remember this name because we're going to have to use this name as an intent name in the target model for a feature. And the plane is going to be this sketch plane that I created. This is good. Let's click the OK button. So now I have my first reference created. Let's create another one, datum reference. And once again, this is going to be an intent datum plane. And we're going to define the name, and I'm going to call this one my UDF and orient plane. And again, we need to remember this. We're going to use this later on in the target model. And I will use this plane and then click the OK button. And let me turn on my datum point display. And I'm going to create a third datum reference. And let's change the type to intent datum point. And then I will choose that point that I created previously. We need to define an intent name. I'm going to call this my UDF location point. Again, we need to remember this name for the target part. And then I will click the OK button. So that's good for my first initial references. And I'm going to end up having to create a second set of datum references. So just to make my model tree a little bit more organized, I'm going to go to the Annotate tab. Let's create an annotation feature. And I will go to the Properties tab. And I will call this my initial, did I spell that right? Intent references. I'll just use refs as the name and then click the OK button. So this is going to be a completely empty annotation feature. I'll go back to the Model tab and I'm going to drag this up right before that first intent reference. I like using these empty annotation features as a sort of way of guiding someone to what my intent is. Let me create another one for the next set of references. Let me go to the Annotate tab and Annotation feature. Go to the Properties tab. And I'm going to call these my query intent references. And you'll figure out why I'm calling them my query references in a second. So let's go back to the Model tab. In the source part for the user-defined feature, you're actually going to make two different sets of these datum reference features. So the first set are going to be for whatever datum features the UDF needs. Now we're going to create another set. Let me go to datum and then reference. And let's see, for the type, let me change this to an intent datum plane. We can give it a name. I'm not sure if this is required because we're actually not going to use this name later on, but let me call this my query sketch plane. Doesn't hurt to give it a name. And here's the important part. This is the real trick. This is the part that's hard to figure out about setting up these UDF features. The second set of your datum references are going to contain a search. So with the field selected, I will click on the search tool. Let's click on the binoculars, and we're going to look for, and here's some important steps. If you don't do these steps, you're not going to get this to work. Instead of searching for a datum plane, you're going to search for an intent datum plane. And we want this to be equal to, let me go to the drop-down list. Let me choose the name of the UDF sketch plane. Again, that corresponds to the intent name from reference 1. And you don't want to click Add New right now. If you do that, the next step won't work. We're going to go to the Options drop-down list. And here is an option to save this query to the feature. If you take a look in the PTC help, there's a typo here. I lost a lot of time to the typo. The typo says to click Save Query to File. That'll get you nothing. You want to save the query to the feature. And again, don't click Add New first. That might end up graying this out. So now we've added this query we've selected that. We're going to save this query to the feature. I will click the OK button. Now, if you take a look in the datum plane field, it says query number 1. That means that the search is built into this datum reference. Let's click the OK button. So there we have reference 4. Now we're going to repeat the process. Let me go to datum reference, and this will be another intent datum plane. And again, I'm not sure if this is required, but I'm going to type in a name for this one. This is the query orient plane. And once again, we will go to the search tool. We're going to search for an intent datum plane. Then I'll use the drop-down list to choose the name of the orientation plane. Then we'll go to options, save query to feature, and then click the OK button. Once again, it says query number 1 inside of there. That is good. Let's click the OK button. And we're going to create a third datum reference. Datum reference. This time it's going to be an intent datum point. Let me define a name here, and I'll call this my query. Just call it the query point. And let's use the search tool. We're going to change what we're going to look for from point to intent datum point. And then let me go to the drop-down list and choose the name that I gave in the first situation, UDF location point. Do not click Add New. Go to the Options drop-down list, save query to feature, and then OK. Once again, it's going to say Query 1. We'll click the OK button. So there we have our 3 references that contain searches to the first set of references. All right, so then the next step that we are going to take is that we're going to create another set of datum features to these different references. So let's create a datum plane to this reference, and you'll notice that it has the intent plane in there, and the intent plane is going to look for the, it's called query sketch plane, but it's going to look for that UDF plane in here, which essentially is going to be defined by this. Again, it's not that automatic. Okay, so that is good for this datum plane. Let me just change the name just so that I can keep track, and I'll just call this sketch. I don't know, I'm losing my creativity at this point. And so then let's see, we have to do that again. Let's create another plane, and then the reference for this one will be this over here. And let's see, properties. Let's just leave this DTM one. I'm losing my ability to name features. And then for the datum point, I'm going to select the reference first and then hit the point command so that it has the intent point listed in there, and then click the OK button. So now we have these references that we're going to use to make the geometry in the feature. And to unclutter my screen, just to make sure I'm not selecting any of these references, I will hide them. We're just going to use these different features. So let's create a sketch. I'll use the datum plane called sketch, and then let's use DTM1 to face the right-hand side of the screen. Let me hit the sketch button, and I will go to my sketch references. My sketch in this particular case, I only want to reference that point. So let me remove the references that are in here. I don't want to use the datum plane called front, one of my default datums. I don't want to use that. DTM1, I'm actually going to get rid of that as well. Let's use as the only reference this particular point. Let's solve the sketch. Hey, it is fully placed. Let's click the close button, and let me turn off my datum plane display. All right, so let's see. Let's go to our sketch view. Let's sketch a circle, and I'm going to center it right on the point. Let's see, I want this to be a diameter of 10. Let's zoom in a little bit. Grab this and drag a little closer. Let's throw in a sketch center line. I'm going to make it horizontal. And let's see, let me sketch in a rectangle and make it about yay big. And let's see, I am going to use the divide tool. I want to dimension the length of this from this point, the intersection of the circle and the center line, but it's not going to exist. Let me just use some divide there, divide there. And let's see, did I divide the circle? Let's try again, divide. Okay, it didn't, but let me delete this line and try again. There we go. Let me take this and I'll use my right mouse button to change that to construction. Now the sketch gets shaded in. I'm going to drop in a point right at that intersection. And that way I can get the dimensions I want. Let's dimension the width of this and change that to 2. And then I'll create a dimension from here to that point. Middle mouse button. Let's change that to 2. Hit the middle mouse button a couple of times. That is what I want for my shape. Let's hit the check mark to get out of sketch mode. And with the sketch still selected, I'm going to create an extrude. It's automatically been changed to remove material. I'll use the options tab to change the depth to through all in the first direction, through all in the second direction. Now I'm going to go to the body options tab and make a change here. I'm going to make a separate video on this, something about UDFs. Okay, back in Creo Parametric 7.0, multi-body modeling was introduced. And if you have any UDFs that were created in Creo 6 or earlier, you'll notice that you get prompted to select a body. If your UDF only contains a cut, if you change that cut to all, then you won't be prompted to select a body later on when you're going to place the user-defined feature. Okay, that is good. Let me hit the check mark. And now we've got the extrude feature. Now I've got everything that I need to create my user-defined feature. Let me go to my Tools drop-down menu, and I will go to the UDF library command. Let's choose Create, and I am going to call this my UDF Final, since I finally figured this out after 20 years, and hit the Enter key. And let's see, let's make this standalone, not dependent on the original model. Then hit the Done button. No, I'm not going to store a reference part. You can store a reference part if you want. The features that we want to use, I will select the first datum reference that has the query. I'll use the Control key to select the other ones. And then the datums that are made from those datum references with the query, and my sketch and my extrude, the actual features in the user-defined feature that will remove material from the subsequent model. Let's click OK, Done, Done, Return. All elements have been defined. You'll notice that I didn't have to write any prompts because the prompts are defined by the queries in the datum reference features. And let's click the OK button and then Done, Return. So now we have our UDF created. Let me repaint the screen. Let's try putting this in a model. So let me go to the target model that this is going to go into. So we've got our geometry and a couple of datum points. Now I need to make some datum references in the target model. So let's go to the datum overflow menu and choose reference. And I will create an intent datum plane using this plane. And this is the important part. Now I'm going to define the intent name. And this goes back to that earlier step where I created the first set of datum references in the UDF source model. And I'm going to use that name. It was UDF sketch plane. I happen to know because I wrote it down. So that is good for the first datum reference. I'll click the OK button. Let's create another one. I will go to the, oops, wrong command. Let's go to the datum overflow and then reference, and then choose to define the intent name. And so this one was called UDF orient plane because it orients my sketch on the plane. And so this time we'll use the datum plane called, oops, select it. Oh, let's change the type to intent datum plane. Change the name, UDF orient plane. And now I should be able to pick the datum plane called right and then click the OK button. And let's see, now for the point, we're going to create two separate ones so that we can place the UDF twice in this model. So I'll go to datum reference and intent datum point and define the name. And this will be UDF. Shoot, what did I call in the other model? Let me cancel out of here and go back to the other model to remember what I called it. I thought I wrote down all the times, but okay, back in this model, if I go back to this feature and then edit definition, UDF location point. Oh yes, one other thing that I want to mention. I could have created the sketch in the extrude feature using these original datum references, but there's a reason why we want to copy the datums. If we don't copy the datums, we will not get selections on the adjustment tab later on when we're placing UDF. I'll show that in a moment. Again, this took me forever to figure out. Let's see, let's go to this target model and let's create our other additional references, datum reference, intent datum point, and define the intent name. And this is going to be UDF location point. And if you don't use these names, then the UDF is either not going to place or you're going to get an error. You got to have these UDF or these datum references created in the target model or it doesn't work. Okay, so let's choose the point on the left for the first one and I will click the OK button. Now we're going to repeat it for the point on the right. Datum reference, intent datum point, define the intent name, and watch what happens when I use the same name. UDF location point, the same name that I used just a moment ago when I created the other point. I'll hit the, click in the collector over here. This instance number changed from 1 to 2. So you can have multiple instances of these intent names defined, and it'll keep track of them in the datum reference feature. This time I will use the point over on the right. Let's click the OK button. So now I have all the references necessary to locate the UDF in this model. Let me turn off my datums to unclutter the screen. Let's go to the user-defined feature command and shoot, where's my working directory? UDF final, this is what I called it. Let's go to the open button and we will choose advanced reference configuration from the insert user-defined feature button. I will click OK. And now, because we had two references with the same name corresponding to an intent name in the original source model, I've got to choose which of those points I want to use. Do I want to use the point on the right or the point on the left first? Hey, let's use the one on the left first. I will add it to the selected items list, then click the OK button. And now we get it placed in the model. And the keyway is pointing in a different direction than I want. So I can go to the Adjustments tab, and here it's showing the arrow for the positive side or the viewing direction of the sketch plane. Let me choose the second one in the list. This is for the orientation reference plane. Hey, I'm going to flip this. Now the keyway is pointing towards the inside of the model the way that I want it to. Again, like I mentioned a moment ago, if I had not copied the datums that were defined with the query, I would not have the adjustments tab in here. This is another one of those things that took me a while to figure out when I was trying to figure out how the heck do intent-based datums or intent-based UDFs work. I don't sound frustrated, do I? All right, let's hit the check mark and we have the first one placed. Let's repeat that one more time. User defined feature. Let me go to my working directory where that UDF final got stored. Advanced reference configuration. Let's choose the point on the right hand side. Add it to the selected items list. Click the OK button. Everything's pointing the way that I want. Oh yeah, you have the ability to scale the UDF. You can choose whether the dimensions are hidden or not. You can redefine the features. You can change the adjustments, but everything here is good. I will hit the check mark. And there you have it. That's how you can set up the source model for a user-defined feature to use these intent-based datums and then place it in a target model with those intent names set up in datum references later on. I know no one's ever going to use this functionality, but darn it, I just had to figure this out for myself after 20 years of wondering.